Go ahead.
All right, thanks. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning for EFR, Employee and Family Resources, and the webinar today. My name is Barb Rank, and I will be with you the next 35 minutes or so. Also on the line from EFR, we have Johanna Dunleavy. She is the Wellness Director, and she's going to be monitoring the chat today as we go through this. So I am smiling that we have 55 so far people that have attended wanting to learn more about stress, which is kind of a fun topic to talk about. I love to talk about this topic. My background, as you'll see here in a minute, I have an educational degree. I was supposed to be a high school English teacher, so I've always had that love of education. I then took that love of education into the prison because I was finding it hard to get a job right away, and in Missouri they were hiring teachers to go in and teach anybody who did not yet have their GED. This was early mid-90s. Anyway, so I did that for a year, and what I learned at that job, I learned I cannot teach math very well, but I learned that I also love working with adults. And so I took that love of education and I went into corporate America for about 25 years. And in that time, I also got my master's degree in adult learning and performance. So 4 years ago, I added to my toolkit and I went and became a certified life coach. So some of what I'm going to be talking about today is one of the tools that I can use as a life coach to help people better understand themselves and honestly their stress. So as of today, I am currently off on my own. I own my own coaching and training business, and I do webinars and education still like this. But just to really go beyond people becoming professional and polished and productive, yes, I can teach all of that, but I really like helping people just become more of a person, a healthier human being. So that's what we're going to talk about here today. I'm going to ask you to just join in the chat for the next minute or so. Could you, for me, put in your chat feature, what comes to mind when you hear the word stress? What comes to mind when you hear the word stress?
All right, Barb, I can read some of these off. I see panic, anxiety, sleepless nights.
No, keep going. Sleepless nights, and then what?
Not enough time, anxiety, being overwhelmed.
That's a big one.
Headache, restless.
Good one.
Job.
Yeah.
Can't sleep, too much to do.
For sure.
Cry easily.
Oh yeah, the emotions are right on the surface. Yep. Yeah.
Stress eating.
Oh yeah, coping mechanisms, my favorite. One more.
Fight or flight.
Yes, cortisol, shooting us into survival mode and fight or flight. Well, unsurprisingly, what I heard from this group, as I've heard from almost every group I've ever trained, when we think of stress, most of the time it's negative or unproductive thoughts, right? Just like you all described. Now they're normal, they're completely normal, but by far the biggest thing people think of is overwhelm. That's by far the first answer we get. Anxiety, sleep, when you can't sleep at night, what is that word? Insomnia. And I just want to acknowledge that we're going through a lot of this together, but our brains are automatically wired to go to negative. And so it's not uncommon that those are the first responses that I heard. Again, we'll talk through, we've gone through COVID and we're not quite out of it yet. So stress is still at all-time high levels, and we just have to acknowledge that our brains are trying to work for us, but in some cases they're working against us. And we'll see what that means here later in the webinar. So what I want to do is I always want to bring a different perspective in here just for your brain to consider. And so the perspective that I want to share is that not all stress is bad. Right? And a lot of you are also going through what I call productive stress on the left-hand side, but you don't maybe see it as good stress. And so it's actually just piling up and maybe getting mixed with the unproductive stress on the right-hand side. So let me just ask, and this is rhetorical, you don't have to put it in the chat, but are any of you in a position where maybe you've taken a new job, or you've maybe taken a different role at your current job? Maybe you've started a new relationship. Maybe you've had to end a relationship. Actually, that's on the unproductive stress side. Maybe you've had a new family member, and in addition to the family, maybe you've gotten even a new car. I mean, just anything that's kind of different or disruptive is going to create some stress, but it can actually be invigorating, challenging, and it's something you might look forward to. One of the bottom ones is called helping others. That can actually create a lot of positive stress, but we're going to see in today's session, when it's taken too far, it can have an opposite impact. Now let's look at the right-hand column, the unproductive stress. Here's what a lot of you were given to me, and I get it. It's just feeling overwhelmed and hopeless and out of control and uncertain and just not enough. I'm losing something, scarcity mindset. We face both of these all day long. And so in today's session, I'm just going to help you understand your brain has a certain pattern. And let's take a look and see if that pattern is actually helping you get to a more productive state or how it's holding you back. So with today, we're going to quickly cover what are 3 common sources of stress. And I just always like to go a step further, so I'm going to give you 4. And then in the promotions, it actually said 10 common stress reactions, but there are only 9. So congratulations, we have less content today. Then I'm going to show you how you can learn your own pattern. I'm going to give you my specific examples and what I've learned through this technique and these assessments. And then I'll give you some resources that you can move forward on your own. So 3 common stress sources. The first one I just talked about. When there is a lot of disruption or prolonged change. Anybody COVID? Like, that was long and intense. We're still trying to figure out what the new normal is. That automatically triggered stress for all of us. The next one, any perceived loss, or each of us has our own fears. For some of us, spiders might be something. For others, it won't be, right? We each respond to something differently, but we each have fears. And then chronic physical pain is another source of stress, as well as caregivers of those with chronic physical pain. So again, I won't have you put it in the chat or show of hands, but I'm guessing everybody on this call has had one or more of those categories, maybe even in the last month, year, recently. Again, I said that I'm going to add a 4th, but in a lot of cases, other people and their stress can definitely cause us stress. So I just want to put all of these out there to acknowledge that, again, each of us are going through stressful things on a regular basis. It does not all have to be bad, and we can actually get better at stress. Let's see what that looks like. Today's content is, I mentioned, a tool that I use in my life coaching services. It comes from the Positive Intelligence program. There is a book on this, there is a website on this, and then I have been certified to coach train it. But it's ultimately called Positive Intelligence. And here's how it works. So the first thing that you can do if you want to start the process for yourself is to go out to the Positive Intelligence website and take the first Positive Intelligence assessment. So what it's going to ask you to do is answer these questions based on the last 24 to 48 hours of your particular life. So it's a snapshot in time, and then it asks you to rate and rank certain words and how strongly you felt those words throughout that period. And then it's going to give you a score. It's also going to ask you if the last 24 to 48 hours were kind of an anomaly. Was this a typical time frame, or was there something really different? Because obviously, if it's not typical and you're having to deal with a lot of disruption and change, your score is going to be impacted. When it gives you your initial score, it's going to be on a scale of 0 to 100. And the higher the score, the more your brain is working for you. The lower the score, the more it means your brain at that point in time is working against you. So they also say that it's best if people can get to a consistent score of about 70%. So somewhere in the 70s or above. And what that means is that you're not having to try to constantly manage your brain and your stress activities in your own brain, because you've taught your brain the mental resilience, just like going to the gym. You've got it to a point where it can maintain itself at 70 or above. So don't feel bad when you get a score that's below 70. I would almost guess that everyone on this call, just because we're human and we don't think about this stuff all the time, we're probably not going to get 70 right away. If you do, congratulations. So just recognize it's a score, but it's just a starting point to say, where do I want to go next? I also want to give you an example of what does it look like when my brain is working for me versus what does it look like when my brain is working against me. So here's an example. We've all had this. You have a role in an important meeting in the morning. It could even be with your spouse or your kids. You have to set some expectations, but it can definitely be at work. So how are you thinking about that meeting? If you're in your high PQ or high positive intelligence brain, your thoughts are going to sound something like this. Do your very best to prepare for that. It's okay to be nervous. It's important to you. And get your rest, even if you can't sleep. Have we all faced nights where we're just sitting there staring at the ceiling and then we're beating ourselves up for not being able to sleep? At our best, our brain is going to tell us, it's okay, you're still laying down, you're still recharging, even if you're not sleeping. This is kind of exciting, right? So this is your brain, your own brain, talking to you as a friend. Now let's look at the flip side. If you're in your lower PQ brain, your brain is actually nagging you, kind of being critical to you and saying things like this. Well, there's no getting back to sleep now. Oh, 4 o'clock, 4:55 o'clock. Oh my, I better just get out of bed. This is gonna be a horrible day and I'm already behind. And what if I fail? And well, what if they don't agree with what I'm saying? You know, just on and this is gonna be awful, right? And we all have done it. Even though I teach this stuff, I still do it sometimes. It's if you can catch yourself telling yourself these things from your lower brain, these are not as helpful. And we're actually causing our own stress when our brains are working against us. So this particular test just gives you an idea of to what degree is my brain working for me or against me. Oh, and by the way, those are called the saboteurs, and that's what we're going to take a look at here today. So I found this really interesting, the kind of the basis of this model. They went back and they said, okay, stress. Is there a source of stress? And if so, how can we train people what the source is so that it's not this big nebulous concept that no one can figure out? And so they based the model off this concept that if you think about all the colors in the world, all of the colors that ever existed are really based off of 3 primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. And then you mix different combinations of those 3 colors to get everything else. So they have identified 9 common stress patterns for any human being that once you figure out your specific pattern and combination, that's your color of stress. And it's also your starting point to determine how you want to work through that and if, how you want to become healthier. So we're going to talk about each of these 9 today. But I also, before I do that, want to take a step back and just talk about saboteurs in general. What do I mean when I say saboteurs? Well, first, we all have them. We all have them. And that's because each of us have our own strengths. Those are things that we just are naturally gifted at. We get a lot of energy when we're using our strengths. For one of mine, a big strength of mine and why I was confident that I could go off on my own and start my own business was I have a lot of internal drive. You don't have to get me up in the morning and you don't have to tell me to go to work. Like I like to work. So I know that I have that inner drive in me. That is a strength. Saboteurs are when you take that beautiful strength, maybe it's helping people, maybe it's working with data and synthesizing a lot of data, whatever it is, and you get stressed. And then what you do when you get stressed is you take that thing you're already good at and you crank it up to 150. I also say you double down on the thing you're already good at, because that's natural. It's natural for me, if I'm already a hard worker, to go, well, I better double down and add on even more to my plate, because that's going to fix whatever this is. That may or may not be true, but I'm not even going to question it. So it starts as a strength taken too far. Oftentimes we do not recognize when we're in our overuse state or our saboteur state until we feel exhausted and burdened and heavy and just like, what is going on here? I'm doing the best I can. I'm using this tool I've always used. What's wrong? It's probably coming from the fact that it wasn't quite the right tool. And we didn't even think to maybe dial it down a little bit. We just went into overdrive. So with your saboteur score, it is going to impact your positive intelligence score. So that very first test I mentioned, the heavier or the more habitual these are happening for you personally, the lower your score is going to be, because they're dragging it down. Now, this is the great news in all of this. You know, as you take a look at this, and I love that this model gives us this language. It gives us words that we can say, okay, I think that's me. Now I can do something about it. Now I can check in with myself, question those thoughts, and just get stronger with my resilience. So that's where coaching can come in. All right, we've taken it all the way, the big buildup. Let's start looking at 9 saboteurs, starting with this first one. They're in no particular order, and you can have one or more of these, as we will see. But see if you can relate with stickler saboteur. Stickler saboteur comes from this desire to want things to be right, to want things to be organized, to want things to be done well. That's where it starts, and that's a very good thing. Under stress, when you turn that up to 150 or you double down on that desire for order and organization, it's going to turn into now perfection. The feeling is going to be constantly or consistently anxious and uptight, constantly and consistently trying to make it perfect, which is actually a coping mechanism. So if you hear yourself saying it has to be perfect, this needs to be perfect, that is a sign now of anxiety and stress, and it's probably coming from a saboteur. You know, just look at the feelings that are going along with that, and those are probably cortisol, and those are probably bringing your score down. Then there's just that constant need to be good enough or better or excellent. And again, none of it's wrong. It's just probably turned up too high. And what if we turned it down in that situation to get back into the resiliency mode? So that's just the first one. Second one, we call the pleaser. So pleasers start as strengths of the pleasing strength is the ability to make connections quickly, very relational, collaborative team player, mentality. When stressed, the pleaser is going to turn it up to 150. Pick your number, I'm just using that one. But they're going to double down on who and how they help. They're not going to question it. They're just going to move ahead and do it under stress. So then they might, if they're a naturally encourager, they just naturally encourage people, it's going to turn into excessive flattery. If they're a natural helper, they turn into a rescuer. And it's the person receiving that, either flattery or that feeling of being rescued, they feel that, and it feels almost manipulative in a way. And the pleaser may also feel like, I don't know that this is right, but I don't know what else to do. Then what happens with pleasers in particular, they have overhelped, they have overworked themselves, and they naturally get exhausted. So then what happens is they don't know how to get out of that cycle where, but I don't know how to ask for help. I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to help in this situation. I didn't need to help in this situation. I just did it. And now they're just burdened. So then you're going to hear the pleaser statements, the saboteur statements come out like, why am I the only one that helps? Or why doesn't anyone think about what I need? What that's coming from is the absolute stress point of the saboteur, because what they're saying there is, I need help, but they don't know how to ask for it yet in a very assertive manner. And so again, we all have these. It's just the combination of which one sounds most like you that I want you to pay attention to. This third one, hyperachiever. I will just say this is one of my top 4. I told you earlier, I just really am self-motivated to get out of bed and accomplish things. I really like that feeling of setting a goal and working toward that. That's where the coach in me comes in. When I'm in hyperachiever mode, my brain, and I know this now, it goes into, okay, I just hit that goal. What do I have to do next to prove my value? I mean, it's so subconscious, but that's kind of what's happening. And if I don't hit this next level, then I won't be seen as credible or whatever it is. And so it can turn into unconscious workaholic tendencies, kind of like a 2 over helping. A 3 can get overly into hitting the next level, achieving their next credentials, letters after their name. They get uber competitive when they're stressed out, and that can sabotage relationships with others, and it's coming from a stressed place. It's not wrong to be competitive. It is not wrong to be competitive. It's not healthy when it's coming from your saboteur state. So hyperachiever is the strength of really liking to accomplish things taken too far. It becomes heavy, it becomes burdensome. It's coming from this saboteur. Next up is victim. And this one's hard because when I teach it, a lot of people, myself included, would say, I'm not a victim. I don't identify as a victim. But I want you to put yourself in heavy traffic, maybe not Des Moines traffic, but Chicago, pick your Atlanta. Put yourself in traffic and have someone cut you off. What's your first reaction? It's probably not, but it could be. I wonder what kind of day that person is having, and I really hope that they're okay. We can probably get there, but our first reaction is probably going to be, who do you think you are, and what do you, and you're scaring me. And that's that victim energy of something happened that I was not prepared for, and I got put into a state of feeling out of control. That's kind of what the victim state is. Now, if it goes on too long, then it's going to turn into a perpetual belief system of, I can't possibly succeed unless, because there's something missing or there's something standing in my way. And so there's that kind of that victim energy. It's, no one can help me, and I don't even know how to help myself. I coach a lot of people who start off kind of scared, and it will come off sounding like that, but I know they're ready to move ahead because they hired a coach, right? I encourage them to step out of that fear and walk into whatever it is. If you're truly in consistent victim mode, you're stuck, you're not wanting to move forward, you're wanting to bring people into that energy that can kind of commiserate. So sometimes people will help victims. They'll be like, well, let me do this for you, or let me help you with that. And if they're truly in saboteur mode, they're going to be like, that didn't work, that didn't help. And then the person giving help is going to feel kind of resentful because it truly wasn't what this person needed. They needed to work on their own saboteur thoughts and patterns to be able to move ahead. Next up, they call this one hyper-rational. And I couldn't quite find a picture that I wanted to use. I'm pretty sure this one comes from Harry Potter, but I don't know. This person gave me the look of like, don't bother me with your emotions. So rational is a good thing. Rational is a logical way of thinking about things. It's a very objective way of thinking about things. That is a strength. And then when a rational is stressed out, they turn it up to 150, and they think that I don't want to hear anything but facts, and emotions and opinions are off the table. Unless you have as many facts as me, you're wrong. It turns into that kind of condescending tone of, this isn't worth my time to even hear this if you don't have the right credentials or degree or background, and therefore I don't have to make a decision. So it is definitely a saboteur stress coping tactic. It's these types, when they get into this, are going to come off aloof. They're going to come off kind of superiority complex, as I put in there. And the creator of positive intelligence, and the person who created it, he's from Stanford, and he admits, he's like, this was my top one. And he was in a class one time, and all the students had to go around and give 360 feedback. So keep in mind, he's about 20, he's young adult, and all these students are giving feedback, and they're like, you are just mean, you are judgmental, you are closed-minded. And he's like, what are you talking about? And he couldn't see it because he was walking into class all the time, just extremely stressed, feeling kind of insecure, wanting to be competent in this area and not yet having that competence. So he was projecting this and didn't even know it. So he says, you know, looking back, now that I have had those tough conversations and can see it, this is absolutely where I go under stress. And now that he can see it, be aware of it, and manage it, it allows him to have the relationships that he ultimately wants. And he's created this program. So I think it's an amazing thing. Next up, we have hypervigilance. So let's start with the strength of vigilance. Vigilance is constantly kind of looking out, anticipating what's coming up, what's coming down the pike, what's happening next. If this happens, then what happens? That's natural. It's really good for project manager mindset. It's really good for parenting mindset because, you know, kids, they're unpredictable. Teachers might be good at having vigilant mindsets. Then there's the stress point. And if vigilance aren't aware, they're going to turn it up to 150. And for those of you that are my generation, you might remember Chicken Little. So Chicken Little is just, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. Everything bad is going to happen. And the pressure that comes with that belief that everything is scary and everything could go wrong, there is no relaxation with this saboteur. Okay, there's always anxiety with this saboteur. There's very little feeling of feeling safe or supported when this saboteur is running the brain. So I just want to bring up that it's a dialed up version of a great strength, and it then causes, all of these do, but it causes even more stress that can be turned down and better managed, at least when we're aware of it. Okay, we have 3 more to go. So restlessness is next up. And the picture here might be a little misleading because it looks like this guy and he's out on this adventure and the beautiful, I don't know if it's a sunset or a sunrise, but really what this is like someone who, when they start to get anxious and stressed out, they're normally a go-getter. They're normally willing to jump in and take risks, and they take it to an extreme. It's almost like I need an adrenaline rush. I need to just get out of here and try the next thing. Almost too spontaneous and too risky. It's coming from a stressed state of restlessness. Now, I'll show you here in a minute, but this was my highest one. And I would never have guessed that in a million years, because I would have told you, no, that's just my internal drive. That's my strength of wanting to go get the next thing. And then here's what I recognized quickly it turned into. I didn't like to be bored. And, you know, I'm like, that's fine. I don't need to be bored, right? But then my brain goes into hyper mode with the hyperachieving that I mentioned earlier. Then what else can I take on? What else can I do? What other projects or work things are there? And you start to hear kind of that tone of like intensity and urgency and what's wrong with being bored, right? That's an opportunity for creativity, but my brain did not see it that way. My brain said, no, you have an opportunity to add more value, add more value, add more value. So as you take on more work from this restless state, you start to get frazzled, you start to lose the details, you start to not follow through on some of the things that you promised, because it's coming from this state of, well, that's boring, that's boring, that's boring. And I didn't see it until I saw it. So again, this was my top one. It may not be your top one, but if you have it anywhere in your combination, it's hard to distinguish at first between, well, what's my internal motivation and what's my restlessness? Restlessness has always kind of got a jagged edge to it. And it's going to create the sense that you can't stay and have a relationship because you're always moving on to the next one. Just something I've observed for myself. Next up is controller. Now, on the strength side, not controllers, but on the strength side, This particular strength is one that really drives for outcomes. It's a very focused strength. It can achieve a lot of things, and then stress happens. And so what happens is controller turns it way up, and now it's coming from this fear that, oh my gosh, I have to be the one to make sure all of this gets done, whether it's through me or other people. And so the impatience level increases. The demand, the domination, possibly intimidation tones start to come in. Why isn't this done? It needs to get done. It needs to get done this way. And you're hearing me with that tone. It's coming from the saboteur side of a great strength. It's also coming from anxiety and fear. All of these saboteurs are coming from some fear or another. So just acknowledging if this one is in you, that it's not coming from the strongest place of you, which is your healthiest self. And it can feel productive because you can get a lot done by yourself or through others when you are controlling the situation. However, it has impacts on healthy relationships, sustainability. It can lead to short-term compliance, but maybe not long-term culture. And it's again coming from a part of our brain that's working against us. Last up, we have avoider. So just like the picture shows, very common for avoiders to under stress, pull back, walk away, hope this will be different, hope someone else will figure it out. Ooh, that's potential conflict. I don't like that, so I'm just not going to do that, or have that conversation. It can actually lead to habitual procrastination, and I actually enjoy coaching avoiders because as they talk it through, they actually know what they need to do, and there's a few points where they're like, I am willing and ready to take action on that one. And as soon as they start taking the action, and the confidence comes. But when you've built it up and built it up and built it up, it is heavy, right? It kind of feels like that victim mode of just, this is too big, I can't face this anymore, going along to get along, and then feeling really overlooked and not heard, right? Now, on the strength side, keep in mind they all start as a strength. Avoiders start as listeners. They start as mediators. They start as good relationship connectors. That's a strength. Then when they get stressed, they start to feel like this is too much, nothing good comes of conflict, and then they turn into the saboteur, and their brain says, then we have to avoid, we have to protect, back off, back off. All right, so that was a lot of information. You have all of this in your handouts. If you don't have your handouts, Johanna's going to be emailing those out after today, and it will also include the references to the assessments. So I just encourage each of you, the assessments are all free. You don't have to take one before you take the other one. You can take them separately on your own. But I would recommend the saboteurs assessment. And the other thing that I forgot to put in here is do not use Google Chrome when you take that assessment. For whatever reason, it just will not give you your scores. So use Internet Explorer, Edge, Firefox, whatever else besides Google Chrome. So I want to tell you how I have experienced this particular test, plus the coaching and how it helped me. So what I do and I teach people is take the test and then look at your top 4 scores. And sometimes there's, a tie, but that's okay. These are where you are going to go under stress right now, every time, because these are habitual patterns, they're built in, and they're actually not helping you. They're causing you more stress, but you won't see that right away. Just first take the test and at least acknowledge that you have a pattern. So my first pattern, like I mentioned, was restlessness. There's a lot of energetic force that comes with the feeling of restlessness. So I missed that one all the time initially, because I was like, no, that's just me being driven. And then if I missed that one, if I didn't acknowledge that I was getting stressed out there and possibly pull back and reflect and maybe take a different direction, if I missed restless, I went straight into hyperachiever. So I don't like this feeling that I might be bored or I don't know what to do. Let's get to work. And whether that was the right solution or not, That was what I did every time. Anytime you take on more work that you don't need to be doing because it's coming from a saboteur that's built in anxiety, you're going to stress yourself out. I became then more agitated. I became more demanding, and then I turned into a controller. And I look back and I'm like, under my most stressed states, whether it was being a parent, spouse, or a coworker, yeah, I turned into, you know, Barb described as maybe another word with a B, but I'm not going to repeat it here. But you know, I got kind of mean, and I'm not an angry, mean person, but I was 3 deep into my saboteurs by this point because I took on work I didn't need to do because I didn't want to be bored. And then what I would do is I would turn into hyper rational, because now I'm using my competency as a whatever, a certified blah blah blah, and I have my master's degree, and I started telling people how smart I am. I mean, it's not pretty. It's not pretty. But looking back, I'm like, I can see the pattern. Now, not recognizing it until now, I look back and just ask myself, what does this pattern give me? And really, it was the bullet points there, which are not happy things, right? I was frustrated using this pattern. I was exhausted a lot of the time. I was overworking. My relationships were strained. And I love my carbs, sugar, and alcohol just like the rest of us when you get too stressed. But here's the greatest part. Knowing that I was causing a percentage of my stress and that was in my control, I took control. So now what I do is I can now identify through coaching, observation, and time what it looks like when I'm restless. And then I can question, okay, do I just need to get creative here? Because usually I just go to work, or maybe I just need to relax, or maybe I just need to go spend some time with friends. But I'm going to at least question that and then decide what is the right next step for me. And it may be cooking soup, right? Because that feels productive, but it's actually not as intense as taking on a project. Instead of controlling others, I control my own actions toward my own outcomes. And finally, instead of telling everyone how smart I am through hyper-rational, I'm able to turn that into curiosity. Like, here's what I truly believe, but tell me more about where you're coming from. And that's what I totally love about being a coach. So there are my strengths in action because I'm minimizing my saboteurs. All right, so resources today. I mentioned the website has a ton of resources. There's also a book that goes along with that. You can, for those of you in as an EFR client, you have access to life coaching sessions that you can get through the call center. So I went ahead and put that 800 phone number on there. You can call them and ask for me and say, I'd just like to start some coaching and see what all this is about. And then you can also go directly to me through my coaching company. All right, Johanna, you're up.
All right, thank you, Barb. Such great information. If anyone has questions that they want to share or ask while we're still on the call today, please enter that in the chat, and then I'll moderate a little Q&A with Barb. So as far as our final webinar of 2022, it will be on Wednesday, December 14th at 10 a.m. with Lars Peterson, and he has a topic, Becoming a Healthier You, and that should be a great webinar. You can register for that today on efr.org under the Stay Connected menu. We are your EAP benefit provider if you have EFR's EAP, and in that case, please make sure to visit efr.org and explore the different resources you have available. If you find that you're really struggling with stress or anything else in life, you can use your EAP benefits. In addition to our in-person or virtual counseling, there is also life coaching, and life coaching can be a great resource for individuals who maybe aren't needing something that's, you know, related to anxiety, depression, grief, but more just wanting to get motivated and start making some of the changes that they want to make and they know they can make. They just need a little direction. And so that could be where life coaching comes in for you. So 800-327-4692 is our 800 number that you can call 24/7 if you need to speak with anyone from EFR. Or if you want to learn more about your benefits, like I said, visit efr.org. We are also on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So give us a follow on those platforms and stay connected with a lot of great resources like our podcast, our blog, and other upcoming webinars. And we have a question that I'm going to actually send to you, Barb, via email, and I can just copy the asker in. It's about a specific leadership retreat. So we'll just do that one offline. But Candace, thanks for asking. We'll get that question addressed between you and Barb.
Thank you.
Any other? Oh,
happy to answer other questions. Yeah, sorry, I got so excited. I'm just here to answer any other questions with the time that we have left. Or comments, if there was anything you found helpful.
Comments, yes. And I will be sending the slide deck handout to everyone who joined today via email, so that will come from me. And if you want Barb's contact information, you can just reply to my email with that handout, and I can get that information over to you as well. But I don't see any questions coming in, so we will let everyone go for the morning. But thank you so much for your time and expertise, Barb. I am seeing some things pop up about people thanking you, and also, you know, excited to take the assessment, which I'm excited to take that myself. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
All right, take care. Thank you. Bye.